have some Christian friends that are super angry at God for allowing corruption in the White House. And then others that are praying that God's will be done. We just need to pray that God is victorious in all this spiritual warfare. But what I hear them all really saying is, why does God allow suffering? So I hear some Christians saying that God allowed the president that we have in office now, who they think is evil, so that God would be glorified later. We just have to pray real hard so that Satan doesn't win. And then I have other Christian friends that are saying, I think God has abandoned us. Why the hell would he allow this? And when you look at the Bible, it's not very clear. Paul says that there's no authority except that which God has established. Daniel says that God raises kings and then brings them down. Apparently even the evil dictators. Hosea says that they chose kings and princes without God's approval. And the prophets didn't tell people just to accept injustice, that they should confront their rulers. So the Bible's kind of contradictory on this. But let's talk about the suffering. When God initiated this test that Job should suffer and be tested, and Job wanted answers, God basically said, hey, don't question me. He can test people and make them suffer. Jesus healed a blind man, and when asked, why was he suffering and blind? Jesus basically said, so that God could be glorified when I healed him. So suffering allows God to show off. Then Paul says that suffering produces endurance and hope. But then Ecclesiastes says the opposite. Basically, that suffering just happens by chance to all of us. I'm more inclined to believe that. There are lots of people in the Bible that got angry at God and questioned his ways. King David, Job, Jesus, even Jacob wrestled with God. So it is totally okay to have questions and to doubt God. And also there are scriptures that say, like Joseph said, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, where they enjoy trusting God's will. So both can be true at the same time. But personally, I don't believe that suffering is a part of God's divine chess game. Because if God allows little girls in Sudan to be born into sex trafficking and have to be in that their whole life, it's hard for me to believe that God is micromanaging anything here on earth. What makes more sense to me is that suffering comes from human choice, broken systems, greed, and chance. And you can be angry at that. I do. Anger at injustice is holy. And working for justice is holy as well. But I don't believe that things are God's will, because I think that excuses the systems and people responsible for harm. But that's just my opinion. But I want you to remember that faith and doubt, they're not necessarily opposites. They're part of the same story. You can't have one without the other. Otherwise, it would be fact. So if you're angry at God, you're not alone. And if you find comfort in believing that this is all part of God's will, then that's fine too. That's biblical as well. But these are just beliefs. These are not facts. Life shows us that corruption thrives and the innocent suffer, which means the work of justice, compassion, and protection falls to us. So whatever you believe about God, protecting others from harm is holy work we can all share.